Welcome, everybody, to the American Space Museum. I'm Marquette. We're so glad you're with us to stay curious. Today, we've got one of the sort of founding members of this museum. You certainly feel like it to me, Dr. Al Koller. Hello, Dr. Koller.
Mark, great to be here.
Well, glad that you came here. I called him up at the last minute because he posted something about a book that we all want you to download about the space program. He posted on his Facebook and mentioned that he was in the firing room for Apollo 11 55 years ago. Though look how young he looks.
Yeah.
I've got more gray hair than you do, Dr. Koller.
Looked better 55 years ago.
Absolutely. So I called him up and he come on board here to tell about his own unique experiences of that day, July 16th, 9:32 in the morning, I think it was.
That's correct.
And 50 years ago, you certainly had one heck of a celebration of that at the next door church to us.
Yes, we did.
I was just getting wet behind the ears there, and Ike Ridgel I was in awe of, and one of the great launch directors of our era. So, but you, of course, have mentored me here at this museum and have seen me from going wet behind the ears to doing stuff like this. It's truly amazing, this little American Space Museum, isn't it, Dr. Koller?
Terrific, and Mark, you've done a great job with this. Stay curious. Outreach is what it's all about, and you're doing a terrific job.
Well, thank you.
So when you said, would you come, I said, yeah, I'll be there. So
All right. Well, glad you're here. He's got a couple show and tell things here. But before we talk about this, we wanted to just say that we want y'all to keep Karan Conklin in our thoughts and prayers. She's had 2 chemo treatments. She's at home with her husband and her beloved little Yorkie Terriers that she affectionately loves. You've known Karan since she walked on the scene here, yes. Dr. Koller.
It's been a while.
And we miss her smile around the building and just her energy. We miss a lot of there. So
we need her prayers.
Yeah, need her prayers. She goes way back with this museum. In fact, 9 years ago this week, the building was bought here at the American Space Museum. So keep Karan in your thoughts and prayers. I want everyone to know that you can relive the live transmission as it happens of Apollo 11 going to the moon. I watched the launch live this morning. Their translunar ejection. It's exciting as this website, Dr. Koller, matches up the communications, the TV broadcasts, the photos that happened exactly on the same timeline. Terrific. So you're going to be watching July 20th is Saturday, so about 4 in the afternoon is when they start landing on the moon, and then 11:30 Saturday night is when you can actually watch the drama of the first moonwalk of all time on there. So quite an event that we want y'all to keep up with here. Marty, my co-producer for almost 1,100 Stay Curious shows now, and our intern, Logan Cope. Logan's from the East Florida State College that you know a little about. We'll ask you about that in a minute. Logan, great job. They chose this is an artist rendering. This is Apollo. There's some inaccuracies there because there's a lunar probe off the ladder that never went to the moon like that. And that's the sim bay opened up there, the scientific instrument bay for that was carried on 15, 16, and 17, I believe there. So, but that's the moon ship, Dr. Koller. Not much Star Wars or Star Trekkiness to that, is there?
No, but in those days it was pretty sophisticated for what we had.
It was.
No Wi-Fi, no iPhones.
Right. Miles and miles of wire, switches, a lot of solder.
That's right.
That sort of thing. Dr. Koller, I asked you to kind of help us get into the frame of mind of how exciting this was 50 years ago, half a century ago, double nickel. I can't even believe, like you, that kind of time has passed because we all feel young until we look in the mirror, I think, every morning. But Dr. Koller, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where did you grow up? And how did you get involved as a teenager out at Kennedy Space Center?
Well, I was very, very lucky. My father was a rocket rat from the early days. Glenn L. Martin Aircraft Company in Baltimore is where I grew up. came here in my senior year of high school in 1958.
So Baltimore, Maryland's your
Yes.
your real stomping ground as a kid.
What
Huh?
it was, but came here and graduated at age 17. We had a science fair. It happened to have a couple of people at the science fair. I think it was probably one of the first in the area, from the Redstone Arsenal, Army Ballistic Missile Agency, where von Braun's rocket team was housed. They liked what I had. I had a model rocket engine with some powered fueling areas, and they gave me a job offer on the spot.
Wow, at a science fair.
Here I am. I go next summer, and that's what I was, a summer intern for about 3.5, 4 years while I went to college. But yeah, I went out. In the meantime, just before that, they had launched the first American satellite into orbit, Explorer 1. And that was on a Redstone rocket. That Redstone was a weapon system. Keep that in mind. It's pretty important. It launched from Pad 26 over on what was then the Air Force side, now the Space Force side. And I'll tell you just this, it's about 70 feet long. It's 400 feet from the launch pad to the blockhouse. Okay, 400 feet, keep that in mind. And it had a flame deflector underneath of it that was about 18 inches tall. That's 1958, January 58. 1961, we launched Alan Shepard off of Complex 56, the mirror image of 26, again, over at the Air Force, Space Force. And a Redstone is about, I don't know, a little bit, about 70 feet tall. That's what we said. Didn't even go into orbit. About a 250-mile suborbital flight. That was 1961, May of 61. Kennedy had just made his inaugural speech, kind of a thing, and everybody was wondering what's going to happen next. So 1961, 70 feet long, 250-mile flight. 1969, Apollo 11, Complex 39, NASA. In between, of course, came all the Mercury flights and the Gemini flights. They were all on weapon systems. They all flew on weapon systems that got to be man-rated. Saturn I and Saturn V were the first rockets built for peaceful purposes only. They were here to fly people into the space regime where we could do science and education. If you look at the NASA charter in 1958, that's what it was all about. Eisenhower, and we'll look at. I think we got a map of the Cape, so you'll see all
we've
the
got
different.
those.
Remember, this was a Cold War period. So here we are, 1969, 3 miles from the launch pad to the control center, not 400 feet. The flame deflector underneath, which is like a small city under there, 57 feet tall.
The flame deflector.
The flame deflector.
From 18 inches to 57 feet, in 9 years.
In about 5 years. You know, and here we went to the moon, but the first flights at Complex 39 were, I think, 64, 65 in that time frame. So it's just an enormous amount of work done, developing all kinds of things that had never been done before by people worldwide. It was not just an American program, it was worldwide. And we'll see some pictures later of the firing room where there were about 500 people involved just in that one area to get the launch vehicle off. You mentioned Ike Ridgel.
Yes.
Ike was my very first boss when I went to work here in 1959. And then we've lost him a couple of years ago, finally. But that launch team was transferred en masse in July of 1960, including me, from the Army Ballistic Missile Agency to the new NASA Launch Operations Center here at Cape Canaveral, Florida. I don't think I ever filled out a job application. I just got plucked up and sent over, and did work as a networks engineer for several years, and then became involved with the management of the program when I managed to get a master's degree, and did work when we began to do contracting big time. In the early days, it was essentially mostly military personnel, some civilians like me, and mostly all men. And you'll see that that's important, because when we look at the firing room, we'll see Joanne Morgan, the only woman in the firing room with about 500 guys.
Yeah, we'll see that here just a minute.
These were days when it was very crude. We did everything from a mechanical and electrical standpoint. We didn't have any Wi-Fi or iPhones, as I said before. And somehow we managed to do it with kind of minimum losses until Apollo 1, when we had our first real loss of people.
Heck, we didn't have transistors. We didn't have capacitors. They were just beginning all that.
We had diodes. That's exactly right.
And you've been instrumental in building this museum the way it is, and we're so proud of our Cape Canaveral gallery, where we have all those instruments in there that our friend Murphy Wardman helped get. And
you have things here that don't exist anywhere else in the world.
Absolutely.
This is the only place where you can see those artifacts, including all the handprints from the Apollo astronauts. And of course, the museum hasn't stood still. It's got all of the shuttle activities as well, and is moving forward with the current activities. So we stay active, and obviously membership is very important, and that's why I think this outreach effort is so important. Which is when you made the call, I came, because I think it's
thank you. Yeah. Well, you've been on the show before when we didn't have the Streamlabs studio and all that sort of set up there. And Dave Stange, we've had a program about 2 years with you that was really good. And Dave Stange's up in Michigan, and he's a great supporter of our museum now. And Steve Jokem's up in Illinois, and I want them to know what kind of a great man this is, not only just for what you've done for in the space program, but as we put there on your name, a community leader. You have been involved in so many community things, including you went to work for the Eastern Florida State College that our intern Logan Cope is from there. So you were over department there. What were you doing?
It was
there?
Interesting. At those days it was Brevard Community College.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's now, I guess it's celebrated 60 years probably at this point in time. I did an early retirement from NASA because I was really interested in education as a kind of a lifelong pursuit, and went to work for Brevard Community College as a special assistant to the president. He and Max King and I got along very well.
Mm-hmm.
And I was doing a workshop for the Air Force on management. I trained management activities. And so I couldn't go in then. I had to wait about a month. And when I went in, Max said to me, "Al, it's all changed." I said, "What's that? What is it?" Well, he said, "I don't have a vice president for international education." He retired, "and you're going to be one." I said, "I don't know anything about." He said, "You're a very fast learner, Al. You'll do great." So I was at BCC for 20 years, terrific years. Shored up their aerospace technician program, spun it off into a National Science Foundation Center of Excellence, for which over about an 8-year period we earned about $15 million in grants. No NASA money, all outside money from the National Science Foundation. And we trained and certified about 400 technicians nationwide, aerospace technicians. Before we came on board, all of those activities were done by the individual companies that were here. At one point in time, we had 27 different companies here at the Kennedy Space Center, 27 of them. And you just can imagine the training activities that went on, and it was very difficult to standardize things. Some of the technicians, when they changed jobs about every 3 years because it was a contract activity, started all over. They saw the same videos maybe 3 times. So we had a national program that was well accepted by the industry, and we're doing very well until the termination of the shuttle program, at which time there were 8,000 technicians here without jobs.
My,
And
2011.
We went through the same thing with Apollo. I didn't think I'd ever see it twice in a lifetime. Didn't want to see it twice in a lifetime. What that did to our program, and I'm not sure we'll ever recover from it, was it destroyed the team. The Apollo team was a worldwide team. We had stuff from all over the world, and the interesting thing at Kennedy was we're the launch site. A lot of that hardware never saw its mates until it got here. So the job for our engineers, a lot of operations engineers, which is sort of what I did, was to figure out how to make things match that didn't match the way they should have. I mean, you got to fly it. How are you going to do that? And got pretty good at making those kinds of modifications to use what we had. And that was still true all the way to the shuttle. Oh, so now 55 years ago, imagine no Wi-Fi, no iPhones. When you see the picture of the firing room, all of the lights and gauges and switches in that room had individual wires going to them. And then they had to run out through to 3 miles away by wires and pipes. It just was kind of crude, but that's how we were doing business in 1960, 61, 62, all the way up until we terminated in 1972, basically. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just saying, to reiterate, each one of these consoles has got wires behind it that are connected to the Saturn V rocket in some way.
Well, that's right. And now what you can't see there, if you look just above the firing room to that ceiling, what you don't see is there were 4 big screen televisions that were projected using what were called Ida-4 projectors. I think they were German made, oddly enough.
Way up at the top.
Way up at the top. And that's how the people down where we are, the engineers and scientists on the consoles, that's how we figured out what was going on at the pad 3 miles away. And my job was to be the eyes for NASA. There were 61 cameras up and down that launch tower, and you had to know which cameras to look at to see what was going on at any given place. And I had a gentleman next to me, Bob Young, who took directions, and I would say, put camera 41 on the 3rd screen, and he would do that. And so I was sort of the data coordinator for that, for the visual aspects.
What were you looking for?
Just to make sure what was going on, who was there, whether they were safe, if there were any hazards, and that sort of thing, and just keeping track, because it was all schedule sensitive, and still is schedule sensitive.
So you had a camera on the catwalk with the astronauts walking into
right.
the
and at every level.
And you watched that.
Yeah.
What did you feel when you saw them load up that morning?
We're beginning to cheer, saying, yes, it's for real. It's going to happen. And sure enough, it did. And what a terrific group it was. It became quite a team. Huh. And, of course, after each launch, we would have a celebration, as you might imagine, all over the county.
I'll bet.
Especially at Cocoa Beach. There was a lot of that.
A lot of fun at Cocoa Beach, yes. Bernard Surf, and
the mouse trap.
The mouse trap was a good one there. I've heard tales about.
But you can look, and one of the things that was interesting was it was a very young group at that point in time.
Yeah. So, Marty, would you show where Dr. Koller is, and also Joanne Morgan, the only woman among this group, and now an iconic figure, and she's a wonderful lady, supports our museum. There he is.
That's me with Bob Young.
All right.
And then if you go down about 3 to the right, you'll see Joanne Morgan sitting at a console.
Yeah, she's sitting there.
And what people don't understand is how many people were involved. And it brings me back to a little bit of a story I'd like to tell that's sort of off topic. There was a gentleman named Gunter Wendt.
Yes.
German, who became American citizen, I think, in 55. And he became the pad closeout crew leader. And they called him the pad Führer because he made sure everything was perfect. And he wrote a book called The Unbroken Chain.
Here, show me the book there.
This is a copy of the book. The Unbroken Chain.
Arthritis in that hand there.
Old people.
I'm right behind you, Dr. Koller. Yeah,
now,
classic book. Many of you have this on your library.
He was a personal friend. He's no longer with us, but I'll tell you about what he says in there. And there's an excerpt that I love and I share with people. He said that he frequently gets asked, or got asked at that time, who was the most important person in this whole activity? And he said, inevitably, people got their information off of the television set or the radio, and so they were focused on the astronauts and the engineers and the scientists. And what he said was, imagine that the whole structure of that team is a chain from start to finish. You know how chains work. They're individual links. They each do their own little piece. but they have to all be connected. And if one of the chain links is missing, the chain doesn't function at all. He said every person in that business was essential. If they weren't needed, they wouldn't have been there. So all those people you see in the firing room have individual jobs to do. And it was just a tremendous team that learned how to work together over a number of years. Briefings every morning for what kind of work was going to be done all across the center, and then all across the country as well, because we interfaced with all of the NASA centers at that point in time. And it was a very closely knit family, if you can call it a giant family.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the same thing was true for shuttle. It's a little less true today because we have a lot more of the commercial activities that are not under complete government control like the others were. So we're in a shift, and it's interesting to see how the teams perform together to make things happen. But that's what Apollo was all about, and I think the spirit of Apollo was really something. I think there were people, and you're one of them probably, in this country, but all over the world, who watched that television set on July 20th, 1969, to watch Neil Armstrong set foot on the moon for the first time. What a celebration we had.
Yes, it was quite, it was just the man's greatest adventure.
It was at that time.
Is build like that. You had 3 TV stations, okay? You're lucky to have PBS on rabbit ears. And a lot of the current, I always tell people, what was the Twitter of the day? Twitter or X being the most up-to-date information you can get. And that would be the AM radio. That's where at the top and bottom of the hour you would get what was going on, and there would always be an update on there.
And you
Marty's
had a newsreel every week that rolled things up. Now it's interesting because the picture behind us, that's just the spacecraft. Just the spacecraft. It's several spacecrafts, which we can talk about, but look at the complexity.
And this part's the only part that comes here,
that
right there in the middle
there.
Right there, the triangle.
But what comes back to Earth is just that little triangle at the top, which is the crew module.
Well, we know you all are enjoying this conversation with Dr. Al Koller, so important to our American Space Museum the last 20 years, and a role in today's launch 55 years ago on July 16th, 1969, of man's greatest adventure. We know you've got some questions of Dr. Koller. Please list them up there. I did not bring my smart tablet with me, being old school, I guess, here, pretending I'm in 1969. But Marty's there to put the questions up there. So, Marty, go ahead and take it away.
I just had a comment. Al, you mentioned the celebration on July 20th, but the Grumman Corporation, who built the lunar module, we could not celebrate, so we lifted off the moon and docked with the command module.
Well, that's right. You don't want to leave men on the moon without a way home. And so that command and service module got us back, but what got us down to the moon and back up again was the lunar module, which is behind Mark's head there.
Yeah.
And it's a 2-part module. It has a lander, and then it has an ascent stage. And all of that had to work. Propellant from both sides. It was very, very complicated.
We'll review a little bit about that.
Let me say just one more
sure.
thing about that. An awful lot has changed now. We're getting ready to go back to the moon, and we're going to do it in very different ways. But what hasn't changed is the physics. Space is still a very difficult place to do business in. And we've had issues recently with some failures that we got very complacent or taking for granted that it's almost automatic. It is not automatic. And you still require a team of people with very talented and experienced folks who know what they're doing to make it all come together. And I was lucky enough to be a part of what was man's greatest adventure. We're about to repeat that, and I hope we do it within the next 3 to 4 years. We'll see what happens.
We certainly will. As the Artemis program, the sister of Apollo in mythology, they're now looking at December 2025 as the next launch of the crew Artemis 2. Let's look at that picture here of a great launch. I'll get to your question there, Marty, as I put up here a historic photograph here. This is taken by Jacques Tijoux, and this is from the book by J.L. Pickering and John Bisney, picturing Apollo 11. Really the first comprehensive photo history of the flight, an amazing book. And this is 9:32 Eastern Daylight Time, and I watched it at 9:32 go off. It's kind of fun at home, getting the, like I said, the Apollo real time you'll want to see. All three astronauts were 40 years old, and Buzz Aldrin is 94. Okay, and Mike Collins and Buzz Aldrin are deceased, of course. So,
Buzz is not.
Yeah, Buzz is 94.
Yeah, Neil Armstrong.
1 million spectators watched this from the highways, beaches, everywhere they could get their eyes on it. And of course, you don't remember any of that because you were in the control room
No,
back
but I
here.
had a wife at home who said the schools let out and everybody around here was focused on what was happening.
Do you know the story about Joanne Morgan not being allowed in the firing room? Marty's got a note on that.
No, I've let her tell that story.
Okay.
But no, she worked in instrumentation and I was in launch vehicle, and our paths didn't cross very much until a little bit later in life. But well, that didn't quite true. She and I shared some high school activities, I guess, in the earliest days.
Yeah, Joanne Morgan, look her up. She's like you two have shared a stage before, I'm sure. But she actually got her job by the postmaster recommended that she apply for it. It was a job on the wall at the post office here. She's a Titusville native, and cooling off in Montana right now, Joanne. If you're watching this, she's been on Stay Curious, and she really gives it away. She's an inspiration, of course, to women and men of what she's done, and it's still at her age, she's out there very involved in sharing her life. She was also in the shuttle era. She broke the glass ceiling on all kinds of things, and she was she's director of human spaceflight, I think, for a while out there.
Well, one of the things that you need to keep in mind is that a lot of these people are no longer with us.
Yes.
The only place that exists right now that celebrates the people who were involved is this museum. And Stay Curious has been one of the areas where we have captured some information from all of the people, even folks like me who don't have the most exciting story to tell, but and have kept that for posterity. It's very historically very, very key and very important. The artifacts that are here are basically all you're ever going to have from the Apollo program. There are no more. Same was true now for the shuttle program. One of the things that we're not very good at as Americans is preserving that sort of thing. What we do is say, that was great, what's next?
Yeah.
We don't celebrate our achievements nearly as much as we should. And I'll never forget, I had a trip. I told you I got to be vice president of international education at Brevard Community College, and I got to teach in 10 different countries. One of them was Moscow, Russia, right after they had opened it up. And I was amazed. In the center of the major part of Moscow is a stainless steel tower about 400 feet high, I guess, celebrating Gagarin. They know how to celebrate their achievements.
Wow.
We could learn a little something.
Yeah, they do. They get statues, so forth, of their red square with the cosmonauts buried there. That
So
sort
please,
of thing.
if you aren't already supporting this museum, think about joining up. It's not all that expensive, and it gets you some free admission when you're here. And
That's
one of
right.
the things that we will see are a lot of school kids coming in because it's much more laid back than the other areas where we celebrate aerospace. It's kind of like being at home. Come on in and take a look.
Well, it is. It's like a big space cave or man cave, if you will, to me. My first visit 7 years ago, and I was completely hooked. I've told this story many times, writing a column on this museum for my Stargazer column in the Johnson City, Tennessee newspaper, and filled out questions with Karan, 20 minutes, and we looked at our watches 2 hours later, and I realized this woman had me hooked on this museum, and I was coming to stay. And then people like you, Dr. Koller, taking me under their wing, and just I appreciate, like everybody knows, the history and who these people are. We keep calling them national treasures, and you are a national treasure. You did something that no other business, whatever you want to call it, has done in our country, and that is put human beings and significant uncrewed spaceships around the earth to benefit mankind in so many ways.
Well, that's exactly right. And we haven't gotten to the point where we're landing on the moon yet. We will today, I guess. But there's a plaque there that says, "We came in peace for all mankind." Those are words that I hold very dear, because that's what the space program meant to me. We came in peace for all mankind. And that's still true for NASA. Still doing that, knocking the ball out of the park, trying to do their best to share the information on science and technology. And today it's very important because the pipeline for the talent of the future is not full the way it ought to be, in my opinion. With the hands-on skills that technicians have to have, and that's a great place to start. I was lucky enough to start as an electrical tech, and then to go on to engineering and science, and eventually to become astronauts. That path starts very early in life, and education is right at the heart of all of it. If you don't believe me, talk to anyone you know who is an astronaut or who knows the astronauts, and they'll tell you that's where you begin.
Yes, they rejected astronauts have told us out the visitors complex that they went back and got another degree.
Yep.
Or they learned how to fly, or they learned how to do something that would separate them again from there.
Well, the biggest thing was, I'll tell you this, nobody that I know who worked in Apollo failed to understand that they were part of something that was bigger than themselves. They were making a contribution to a big cause that was very, very important, and that made it easy to get people excited and dedicated. And that's why you would find guys who were here for 24 hours at a time.
And you were selfish with your own time. You were selfish with your families. Families understood. Your wife, for example, and family. I know it wasn't all peaches and cream to be out there at all hours and different hours, but it seemed like the families finally embraced that this was something that wasn't being done just for America, but was being done for the whole world.
That's right.
Am I right?
For all mankind.
Yeah. It was, Marty, you writing down a question or a comment there?
Well, we had a question from Dave Stange. Did you, Dr. Koller, know Jerry Begley? I believe he was in the back room during the launch. I met him a few years ago, and he talked about how they all went outside after the vehicle cleared the tower.
Jerry Begley.
No, I don't think so. I know Dick Begley.
Yeah,
But
Dick Begley is a
I
different.
I don't know Jerry.
Well, he's
But
talking
like
about you saw the rocket go up. When was it when you whipped off your headphones and went outside?
Well, you didn't. We
didn't?
were we were in the firing room, and you turned around, and there were great big windows in that firing room, and you could look out the windows, and that's what we did.
How was the noise, the rattling that
It
day,
was-
55 years ago,
It was,
sir?
even in the building, the vibration was there for sure. But if you were lucky enough to be outside, it's very obvious that those waves of sound and pressure hit you, and you know that it's a 7.5 million pounds of thrust, 5 engines on that S1C stage, F1 engines, biggest engines ever made. And the interesting thing now, by comparison, is what the Starship is looking at, 33 engines, something like 16 or 17 million pounds of thrust, not 7.5 million pounds.
Yeah.
And 400 feet tall. The Saturn V was 363 feet to the tip of the escape tower. And it's a simpler ship, believe it or not, because the technology has come a long way. We had millions of parts to deal with. They still have quite a few, but not as many as we did.
We're enjoying Dr. Al Koller here. Like I said, great supporter of our museum. He's been on the board. He's on the advisory council. Your input has helped shape this museum, no doubt. Marty, go ahead with the question there.
Dean Babcock is asking Dr. Koller, how soon do you think it will be before the Chinese land humans on the moon?
That's a really good question, and it scares me because they've already done collections of rocks on the backside of the moon where we don't have a presence, and we don't see anything from Earth. So they could be much further along than we think they are. I think what you're looking at now is the buildup of an infrastructure that for the first time contemplates from the NASA side permanent colonization and an ability to carry materials up to the outpost, essentially gateway, that will be parked at the moon and be a place where we can fly from the Earth to the moon and not have to go land on the moon, but rather park at the gateway and then go down from the gateway and come back up to the gateway. And we're getting ready to colonize. I think they will, at the rate they're going, they may beat us to the moon again with manned. I think they don't have the same issues that we do with safety for the crew. I hope I'm wrong about that, but I think they take greater risks. But I'm not an expert on Chinese space programs. I don't know for sure.
What we've talked about on Stay Curious is they're looking at 2030 to 32 time frame when humans are going to land there. And Artemis is still kind of on track for 2027, if it would be the third Artemis launch to be the lander. So time will tell, but we do know China doesn't have the political yin and yang, shall we say, that we have here in America.
Yes.
So when they say we're going to put money towards that, that money will never go away by a congressional act, because the communist nation is what they are, right,
Run a
Dr.
different
Koller?
way. Absolutely right.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we've been going back to the moon for every administration has had some sort of a Democrat or Republican an idea to go back to the moon, because we look at what 50 years ago this completely revolutionized how we not only live on Earth, but how we perceive ourselves as Earthlings when they saw that beautiful blue marble rise above the horizon. It was completely transcended what we were as humans, right?
Well, absolutely. If you talk to, and you have here, astronauts, they will tell you that it's almost a spiritual thing. You rise above the Earth and recognize how fragile it is, how thin the layer of atmosphere is that's breathable, and and then if you look at what we know now after the Webb telescope and so on, what a small speck we are in the great scheme of things in the universe. It's just amazing to me.
But how amazing we are as miracle creatures on this planet that are intelligent, and time is so incomprehensible to us humans. Yeah. 65 million years ago were these giant lizards called dinosaurs, and they thrived for almost 200 million years. That's what you forget about. They had hundreds of millions of years on the Earth before their demise. Mankind, as we know ourselves, intelligent for the last 5,000 years, building pyramids and things like that. It's really a speck of time that we're in, is how we've developed. And in this 50 years since Apollo, here we are with all these conveniences in our vehicles that are safety. Wish I had a car that would beep when I'm turning into somebody turning left. Okay, Marty? I know you got one. Once in a while I'm going like, whoo, that was a close call. Maybe I need to get me one of them new cars.
Well, we live in a really interesting time. We're living in a time on Earth where, for the first time, I think, ever, we can essentially catalog the total knowledge of the human race and access it.
Oh, absolutely.
So passing it along from that standpoint has become easier. But along with all the good, there comes some bad. And the most interesting from my perspective right now, what I'm watching very closely, is artificial intelligence.
Oh.
And what that will mean, because there's a whole lot of good, but there's also a whole lot of harm that can come out of that. It's going to be very interesting. Didn't have a whole lot of AI in the Apollo program.
No. 64K of memory, those of you that know. And just a head up to my producers here, Marty and Logan, we're not going to show beyond the group of four or chums with him on our script there, because we're having a great program here, and I'm not going to show all those other images of the program there, because we want to hear from Dr. Koller about this. Well, first, this happened on 1959, okay, 65 years ago today. A Juno 2 rocket exploded spectacularly on July 16th, 59. Cape Complex 5, Dr. Koller.
Mhm.
That's an old complex.
Yes.
Right there in the ocean. Again, pioneering, 5.5 seconds. It lasted in its flight. But these were the mistakes that needed to happen to get to where this momentous moment today.
What date was that?
1959.
Yeah, but they.
July 16th.
Yeah, I was there at 26,
Yeah.
looking at that.
Yeah, July 16th.
And I had just gone
same
to work,
date as the
essentially.
Apollo
And,
launch.
yeah, and well, it was, except it wasn't. It was earlier, 10 years earlier, right?
Uh-huh.
Talking about.
Yeah.
And I saw that, here's the interesting part. It went up out of the off the launch pad and came right back down within the perimeter fence.
Oh my gosh.
And I thought all of my new friends were dead. Not true. The blockhouse did its job. Then the team went out and fetched up the pieces, went back to the engineering E&L building at the industrial area and troubleshot and found that it was a diode that had caused that problem.
Huh.
And that was all done within about, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 hours of the actual. So there was an awful lot of on-site capability for accessing the science and technology needed to troubleshoot things. And if I had to put a single thing on their plate for those of you who are trying to be technicians or engineers, troubleshooting is the ultimate talent to have. That's where you find out how much a person really knows. When it doesn't go the way it's supposed to and you got to figure out what went wrong, that's really magic when you're able to do that.
I'm very impressed with that too, that 55, 65 years ago, they could isolate exactly what happened.
Yep.
And a heck of a photographer to stand there and take that picture
Yes.
too, by the way. That wasn't a remote camera because I don't think they had them back then.
That's all right.
Well, here's something that is dear to our heart that my 7 years here, I've helped lug it around to a few locations. This is what we call the famous Koller map, and it's laid on the floor at an angle. Dr. Koller, explain this, that you and your father did in 1970.
Well, it wasn't me. It was my dad. I told you it was a rocket rat from the early days. We went to Denver for the first Titan static firings and so on. So he was serious about his business. He became a field quality engineer. And in the later areas of life, he was an inventor. He holds a number of patents. In this case, he was really interested in telling the story of the Cape development chronologically. And what you see along that is the Atlantic Ocean up at the top, and it's the Banana and the Indian Rivers essentially in the blue that you see there. The land on the between the river and the ocean is really Air Force property, or was now Space Force property, and everything below that is Merritt Island National Wildlife Refuge and NASA. Okay, and there's a causeway across that you can see where you can get between the two. Those launch pads were there to develop the weapon systems during the Cold War, and the Army Corps of Engineers, and it's God bless them, they find a pattern they like and they duplicate it. So all those launch pads, a whole lot of those launch pads are very similar. I guess 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, all the way down to 19 or 20. And then to the left of that would be Complex 34 and Complex 37. Those are, 34 was where we lost the 3 astronauts for Apollo 1. 37 is now being converted for use as a something SpaceX will fly off of that, I believe. Maybe the Starship, we'll see where that's going to go from. So, and what happened was picture this, 20 feet wide and 40 feet long, all plywood. And when you look at it, it's blank. There's nothing there except the land and the water. And then with a series of motor-driven boxes underneath the platform, those individual pads would pop up in the sequence in which they were actually built. This is my dad at work, kind of a genius putting stuff like that together, if you will, and making a live electromechanical program that came from his thinking about how you would tell the story of the development of the Cape over time. It's gotten even more complex. It's been kept a little bit up to date by people here, I think, but basically it tells the story of how the Cape became what it is today over time. And that's what you're looking at.
But you had a videotape and monitors going on with some history.
Did, but not when it began. It was.
So these would flip over, and man, you had windshield wiper engine motors under there.
That's exactly right.
Radio Shack was one of your dad's friends, probably.
And that's right. Each one of those pads was essentially done to a 10-to-1 scale, so they're in sort of within dimensions of one another, getting bigger and bigger. And each had model rockets on them, basically, to show what was launched from there. All
of you visitors have seen it here. Quite an heirloom of our museum there, and we're proud that we retain it up there on the wall.
Well, you have what the original was. That original map, which is about 4 by 8 feet.
Mm-hmm.
He put in the back of a trailer and actually went around to the different schools and showed it off.
Wow, this is your dad.
It was his educational outreach program. That's how he did that activity. And that was after he'd retired. Basically, he did this.
Interesting, very interesting. Yeah. Well, here's your digital book that we want everybody to get online and get. Go to exploringspace.info. And Dr. Koller, you've got a copy there.
I do.
Why don't you?
But it looks pretty much like what you see up there.
Yeah, I'll just show everybody. What was your idea about this? It's an awesome history.
It's really pictures and captions for all of the history. And it came out of a pamphlet that my father did initially that was probably about 6 pages long, all black and white. He would print them at home and take them to the museum, and they would sell them for $1 a piece. The print is probably still available through Amazon, but frankly, the digital version, which cost me nothing to share, is much better because the pictures are better. These are all old photographs, so high res is not possible in print, but does pretty well in the digital version. And there are a whole page of hot links, and all those hot links are active on the digital. You can't do hot links on paper.
Right.
And in the final section of the book, a little bit of the secrets of living and working in space, what it takes, why we do launch windows, what they mean, how do you get things to orbit and what that means. That's all explained in pretty simple language, and hopefully it can be used in schools to do what isn't done very well today. We don't really teach much about the space history at all, and it's a really neat way to illustrate some of the physics properties if you use models and activities that are hands-on, not just talk about it or read about it.
Well, y'all be Googling that. I know you will. It's beautiful to have. Great resource.
Yeah, exploringspace.info or e3company.com. Either one will get you to it.
And you can, what a great primer for schools, for young kids, for you teachers out there. Just the facts here. Very concise and sweet there. We got some pictures like you're not going to see anywhere else.
That's right. That's true.
Very beautiful. Laid out there and really an asset.
And it's not just NASA. It is, in fact, Cape Canaveral Spaceport, all of it.
Exactly. And show your helmet there.
Oh, hey.
Yeah, this is a Koller heirloom for sure.
When you dress for field work, you got to have a hard hat.
There you go.
And that was mine for many, many years. And when I was in the early days, they sort of treated me like family. We were pretty close, and I got a nickname early in the game because I was a college student. Some of you will remember the cartoon, Beetle Bailey. Lieutenant Fuzz was the newcomer.
There you
Who
go.
had to fit in with all the old timers who knew everything more than he knew.
There's a hard hat that's over 50 years old
It is
right
indeed.
there.
It is
Dr.
indeed.
Koller. Marty's got his hard hat, I know.
But the old timers weren't that old.
Exactly.
You're exactly right. You're exactly right.
Well, Dr. Koller, we've enjoyed this a lot, and I'm wrapping it up here. We're not going to go through all those pictures that we talked
No,
about
that's
because
fine.
we've had a great time here. Marty, you got any other questions there?
No.
Okay, well, we know that you're all enjoying this a whole lot. You've been interviewed many, many, many times, and here's the Solid brothers there, Jean-Luc and I'm trying to think of the other Silas boy there, and that's Mr. Lee Solid.
Yeah.
Yepper, he passed away about 6 months ago. There's the Koller map in the background there. Silas, John and Luke and Silas is the other one. They've done a documentary with their grandpa that was very interesting on there. You want to show that again?
Yeah. Can we go back just one
sure.
more shot?
Yeah. Let me show just a brag book shot there of you with. There's a nice picture I took of you during that interview session there, and
Oh yeah, there you go.
there you are with Terry White, Bob Seek, Mike Leinbach, who together launched over half of the shuttles,
Yeah.
and Jonathan Ward there that wrote a couple good books on Cape Canaveral that I know you've read, and then of course the Bringing Columbia Home book, and with Leinbach, and then Eileen Collins's book there. So that was always fun to get you space workers together like that.
It was a lot of fun. Yes, indeed.
On there. So, well, we're gonna. I'm not gonna go through these. I'm gonna go back here. Dr. Koller wants to talk about, as we enjoy this conversation on the 55th anniversary of man going to the moon. There's your U.S. Today headline from July 20th, 1969. One thing I love pointing out, Dr. Koller, is these photographs taken where photographers took the photos off television screens.
Yes.
We didn't see the pictures coming back from the moon until 5 days later, or even a week later on there. And then here's Armstrong, Aldrin back home in there. So 55 years ago, you wonder what that was like. Okay, I'll tell you what it was like 55 years ago as I open up a Publix ad. Who likes coffee out there? Well, a whole pound of Maxwell House coffee was 49 cents. A pound. I don't think you can buy a cup of coffee for 49 cents anywhere.
Right.
You'd be stealing it if you had to. So just how the way we were 55 years ago. But you wanted to comment about going to the moon, Dr. Koller?
I just want to give you maybe 2 minutes of physics.
Of course.
You'll see that, and we're going to do it the same way this time with Artemis. The first thing that you do is you have to get out of the Earth's gravitational pull and environmental friction. So you fly to an Earth orbit, and you rotate around the Earth a couple of times, or however many times it goes, until the timing is right to go to translunar injection. And then you leave the Earth's gravity, essentially, and at some point, the moon's gravity takes over. And you come back into the moon, and then you have to deorbit to get around the moon and to essentially be in an orbit from which you can then fly down to the moon. And meanwhile, while you're headed down to the moon, the guy who's running the ship continues to be in orbit. So now we have these moving parts, all the time moving parts. The interesting point from a physics standpoint is it takes just as much energy to stop as it does to start. Keep that in mind. It takes just as much energy to stop as it does to start. So when we start to fly to Mars, keep in mind they have to carry enough fuel. If you don't, you're just going to go back out into space forever. You're gone forever, and there's no way to retrieve that kind of a thing. And that's the point where I said a lot has changed to the technology side, but nothing much has changed from the physics side. Nature is what nature is, and we have to deal with it. So when you see people who put holds on launches, who are very concerned about things maybe you don't understand, part of it is the dynamics of getting from here to there in one piece and doing it with enough residual to get back safely, recognizing that the physics really don't change. It is what it is. And mathematics becomes a very important part. And one of the things that I guess surprised me the most, and that has changed over time, is the importance of time, knowing how to keep track of time, not in minutes or hours, but in seconds and microseconds, milliseconds. So we've gotten much, much better at the ability to do very small increments of time, which means we can have much finer control. And that's going to continue.
That's what that means, is having more interesting control.
Yes, a whole lot more control. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Well, we appreciate Dr. Al Koller taking his time to join us today. And at my last minute request, thank you so much, sir. I know Gary Gerald, who's our Vidalia onion and peanut farmer up in Georgia. Gary's watched this. He found us during the COVID.
Oh.
And his wife Donnie said she's so glad he did, because he just it was something that we didn't realize what we were doing for people during COVID.
Yes.
And Dave Stangy's up there in Michigan. Doug Forrest is in Los Angeles. Carlton Bailey's just around the road here at just outside of Port St. John. Canaveral Grove is what I'm trying to spit out there. Our good buddy Carlton, who's photographed over 600 launches. Robert Law is enjoying his cocktail up at Dundee, Scotland. Okay, almost, almost 10 o'clock at night there, your bedtime, Robert. And Dean Babcock, we're glad that you're watching, Dean. Tom Colbert's on the air with us today. And Cliff Watson is having brekkie in Pomona, Australia, where I understand, talking to Scott Polk of New Zealand, that it's gotten into 20s and 30s there in Australia, which we are sweltering here, Dr. Koller, but our southern friends there are having winter.
And there are launch sites in both of those countries. So
have you been?
No, I haven't been, no, but we do have launch sites in those.
Tom Celentano's watching also there. So Marty, thank you for doing a wonderful job on Streamlabs with our intern Logan Cope. And Dr. Koller, is there something you wanted anyone to know about this man's greatest adventure? I wonder if there'll even be news about it on the 6 o'clock news today.
Well, I hope it gets mentioned, but I think the spirit of Apollo was a really important one. We come in peace for all mankind. If we're going to go to Mars, it's a whole different challenge. It was 3 days from the Earth to the Moon. 3 days. It's months from the Earth to Mars. You don't get back home for medical concerns or that sort of thing. And there's no way to take enough M&Ms and Hershey bars. You're going to have to grow your own food. So it's a whole different challenge, and really looking forward to it happening sooner rather than later. I hope I'm around when we take that first shot. We'll see. Elon Musk is behind the push to go to Mars sooner rather than later, and I'm 100% for it, but we need to be safe. That's always the challenge.
Always a challenge. Well, thank you, Dr. Koller, again.
My pleasure, Marty. Thank you for inviting me.
And personally, thank you for all you've done with my changing my life down here.
Doing great, Mark. You really are.
We really enjoy it, but it's all our team here. We've got a great team here in the museum pulling together. And we're going to solve some of our issues out there, as well as keep reaching out to everybody out there that wants to know about space history from national treasures like this one, Dr. Al Koller.
You know what we didn't do? Give them the website.
Oh, for the American Space Museum?
Yeah.
AmericanSpaceMuseum.com. .org actually.
.org.
And that's where you can donate to our museum. I usually put something up there. But didn't today. But yes, you can reach out to us on in many ways with PayPal. We're going to have a membership campaign, $40 for family membership, $25 individual. Those of you that are out of town, you may never come here, but that's a way that you can say you're a piece of our museum, because we send you a nice little certificate and all that to formalize it. Tommy Usiak in Pennsylvania has done that. All right, Steve Jokums up in Illinois has also done that, and we appreciate everybody supporting us. We're your family. We're your space family. And so come join us, and you'll get to meet people like Dr. Koller, maybe at future events that we have for membership. So So thank you all out there. So again, thank you, Logan and Marty. Tomorrow, I'm going to be a little off the cuff with some of my recollections of 55 years ago as a 15-year-old young man confused about everything in life except the moon and wanting to go to the moon. And then girls came along about that same time, and then I really got confused, Dr. Koller. And we want to shout out to your wife Carol and your whole family out there watching, and so proud of Grandpa or Dad, Grandpa, and great Grandpa here too. So everybody out there, you have a great time enjoying the Man's Greatest Adventure. Go to it on Apollo Real Time. We'll be talking about the rest of the week. Tomorrow I'll be talking about some of my personal adventures. Thursday, we've got Julian Leaks, a photographer for over 50 years. He rode Apollo 16 or 15, one of them, on the crawler out to the pad one time. You're going to hear some great stories Wednesday from or Thursday, from Julian. Tomorrow's Wednesday. Thursday will be Julian. And Friday we'll wrap up our celebration of Man's Greatest Adventure plus 55 years. So until tomorrow, I'm Marquette saying I can't wait to see you in our museum to bridge the space between us.